gives me great joy to welcome our next speaker, Professor K.P. Rao, who is a retired professor at Manipal Institute of Technology and is credited with the development of the Kannada keyboard and software to use Kannada language on the computers. He was trained at the Atomic Energy Establishment, Bombay of the Department of Atomic Energy. Professor Rao took up an assignment in the electronics division of the BARC and had the distinction of working alongside legendary scientists. Professor Rao joined the Tata Press Limited Bombay as a service engineer of electronic equipment and innovative use of electronic printing equipment, where he modified the English photo typesetting equipment to photo compose Indian scripts. In 1980s, Professor Rao wrote a DOS-based editor program for Indian scripts. The Kannada version was known as the Seriyapu editor, and the keyboard layout was known as the KP Rao layout, which was accepted by the Karnataka government as the official keyboard. He has authored a Tulu editor to incorporate the additional vowels of Tulu language, and Apara, a new font with standard English characters and a few modified English characters. He has written many books on the technology of printing. He has received various awards and recognition, which include the Nudishri Award in the year 2019, the Nadoja and Rajotsava Award in the year 2013, and the Eminent Elogian Award in the year 2016. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. I hope I am audible to start with. First of all, I have to thank the organizers to call a wild card selection of mine into this. First thing is, I don't belong to any organization. As you could see, I'm retired totally. And my work is not sponsored by anybody, at least at this moment. All that I do is, I do it for my own pleasure. So it is a totally different world that you have got. So that is possibly explains why I am going to talk totally differently about the subject that we are talking about. It's not what we have to do kind of a thing, but it is to understand what we do or what we have to do. It's the effort that I have got in my mind.
Are you able to share the screen, sir? There is a cannot share the screen while other participants. Okay.
Full statement, yeah. So we start with my presentation as we go. Again, as I told you, this is all being done purely for personal pleasure and not for anything else. It has nothing to do with any government organization, or in fact, I don't look at government organization at all. Having worked in government organization once upon a time, I find it does more disservice than service most of the time. So that is one of the things that happens all the time, especially after hearing Professor Ajay Kumar's lecture sometime back, Dr. Ajay Kumar's lecture sometime back. I think there is really nothing to be done now in Indian languages. CDAC with its own organization has done everything. So what is the point in talking about anything that we have to do at all? That is the kind of impression that I approximately get from this kind of a thing. But in spite of that, possibly I would like to sort of enjoy your company just to tell you a story about language that I am trying to do. At this moment, I am seriously engaged in writing a novel, if you want to call it so, or a huge Kadam Katana, a novel-like story, which is going to be published very soon, that talks about language itself. No language in particular, but possibly a universal application of languages itself. The problem starts very, very differently when it comes to languages. As you would possibly, as I understand languages, as I have to tell you about in the time to follow. But the real story is that the contribution of any particular person to a particular language starts after standardization of that language. One of the biggest tasks that is involved in standardizing a language, as possibly seen by in the reverse order, Professor Asen for the Swedish language, sorry, the Norwegian language, then Dr. Johnson for the English language, and Panini for the Indian language, Sanskrit, once upon a time, is something that attracts me to languages themselves, and possibly everything that is associated with that. So technically, you can call that more as a philosophy of language rather than technology of language. And then if you just look at it, even technology also is philosophy. Philosophy also is technology. That a new viewpoint that you have, look at anything in particular. And very surprisingly, there is hardly any difference between language and technology as I see them. Both of them do the same function. And so it so happens these days, I work more on communication rather than anything else. It is the interpersonal communication or the nature's communicating with you, you communicating with the nature or anyone else in particular, humans, or all this mutual communication is the one that possibly happens only when there is a language to communicate. The language may be very, very rudimentary, or it may go to any particular level as it happens. So that is what we are going to try to sort of these kinds of things. No surprise that one of the philosophers, very well-known philosophers of the last century, Ludwig Wittgenstein, talked about the limits of my language means the limits of my world. This tells you approximately why you use a language. Words are required, especially the human words are required to talk about so many things. If you have to talk about whatever that you know, whatever commands that you want to communicate, whatever that you have to sort of talk about in that sense, anything kind of a command, order, understanding, thought, emotion, everything else are expressed only with the help of a language that we have got. In fact, the reverse process makes you understand the world itself in that kind of a thing. That is why the entire language itself may be considered just as a receiving or a generating, saving, or a sending information or data for a specific purpose suitable to the given medium. We'll come to the medium part of it much later, and we'll be spending a lot of time about the medium as we have to talk about. In fact, fortunately or unfortunately, I happen to live this entire shift of media changes, at least in the last few centuries, the last century, especially when we moved from the mechanical to the language, moved from the mechanical world to the electronics world, and from the electronics world to the digital electronics world, and whatever we have seen. In fact, I was an eyewitness and a part of a participant, a man in the soup kind of a thing, if you want to call it, as it happened. That is why possibly I could be of some use. Or if at all you have to do some thinking at a later time in this particular order. One of my local friends, actually a villager, tells me sometime that language is like a piece of clothing. It is a drape for your thoughts. It is just a kind of a dressing that your thoughts. No surprise that whenever we say about life itself in general, we say that the address and dress makes a man kind of a thing. The address part of it, you know, is the language that you have got. And the dress part of it is the clothing that you have got. And what I want to say that the two approximately are identical. They are sort of an artificial creation, something which has not come naturally with the language, from the nature. But in that, you sort of wrap your kind of a thing, or extrude them into your pipe so that they are sort of moved from one place to the other. When it comes to the language in particular, the way that men use language, not just for commercial purposes or for entertainment purposes, there is something more to language than the other things, like clothing. You can use it for decorating yourself. If you don't have a proper cloth, you are getting undressed. So it is possible to go bare. And possibly it can also hide all your ugliness once you sort of put the right kind of a language over it. In fact, if you just look at it, it's not just literature that I'm talking about. In every walk of society, language is used exactly in this kind of a thing. It is to cover your weaknesses, cover your ugliness sometimes, or to decorate yourself and make yourself look what you are not. That you use a language. And that is the power of language, if you just want to say that, so it that way. So whatever that I want to talk about is concerned with 3 stages of IT revolution, information technology representation that you have got. This actually, I'll tell you the references a little later. Basically, I'm trying to base on some books that I read sometime about 2010 or 2012 from 3 authors. Whatever that I want to talk, I want to base on these 3 steps. One is the moment we decided to have our voice or speech recorded and sort of documented in the form of writing, that was the first invention or the first step of IT revolution. Don't be surprised. The moment you do that kind of a thing, lot of things happen. The moment we invented and used writing, we'll tell you, I'll possibly be able to explain a little later, if at all required for a while. Next was the important invention called paper. Till a long time, even if you had got writing, it was not really used openly, publicly, or into multiple users, unless the right medium was available. The Chinese invention of the paper made Gutenberg's type be useful to society, though it was sort of mechanized and all that kind of a thing. If paper was not invented, there was no way that Gutenberg's type could be used, or a mechanization of writing or scribing a character or etching your data in writing on a wall or anything of that, or painting of that kind, as a mass-produced technology would have been available. That's why the T part of the IT comes after the invention of the paper. It doesn't happen otherwise. Then we go to the other one. Obviously, the moment the technology came in, mechanics or mechanical systems were used in plenty. They came into all that kind of a use. But then, sometime or the other, they had to switch over to the digital medium. And in this area, or the contributions in this area, is also what I would like to explain, because I was a part of life as it happened that particular time. That'll go to next. There are the speech or the voice itself, the spoken language, till the writing or alternate methods of technology were invented, especially in India, almost up to the 10th century, the entire lot of writing or anything that happened either in terms of a little of coins here and there, a few inscriptions, Ashokas or otherwise, a few kinds of books that were written, and all those kinds of things. And there were all these people that I sort of write about contributed to these kinds of things. One of the important things that happens in all these kind of changes was a very peculiar thing that I need to tell you. Till actually, though the writing was invented or it was known in India, even in, or let me just try to put it this way, literature, the Vedic literature or otherwise, the kind of things existed in this country much, much earlier than the rest of the world. Even when the cuneiform writing was being invented, in there, we had much, much larger volume of literature available here, but they could not be committed to anything like a permanence still very peculiar thing had to happen. That was the invention of a different style of writing. A standardization of the language was essential so that what is right, what is wrong, what to say, what not to say was required before a world's largest collection of Mahabharata had to be written only in about 3rd century. All the oral data that was available was virtually of no use. They could not keep Mahabharata in the Mahabharata form till they actually invented writing. And for the invention of the writing, they also had to use a standard language in which they could write the entire kind of a system. A language that could be taught and learned. That is where Panini comes into the picture with all the people who went earlier to him and the ones later also. Yeah, doesn't matter. Let's proceed further and let's go further. These are the 3 books that I'm referring to in most of the work that I'm sort of going to talk about in the immediate future. Andrew Robinson wrote a book on story of writing. Amelia Gnanadekshran wrote a book called Writing Revolution. Richard Sproat's Language, Technology and Society, all are OUP publications. I'm particularly interested in Richard Sproat. You know possibly that he heads the Google Center now for the South Asian languages. Fortunately or unfortunately, I happen to know him. We had something like a correspondence once. Doesn't matter that. But it is the necessity or find the distinctions between different languages to understand not the common platform on which the languages are built, but how each of the languages as they exist are different, though they had a common platform at one time, is what is important. And that is where Richard Sproat had to sort of introduce quite a few of the good things that he have got. What he calls the orthography of the Indian language kind of a thing. Doesn't matter of that anyway. It is just to tell you that these kinds of things exist and this is what we follow. Information revolution after the computers have happened has, especially from the common man point of view, has happened many ways, as you would see. Just listed them here, not very particular in any particular order. All these kinds of virtual libraries, virtual kinds of things. At least I know one thing, that the books that I could not get in my lifetime, I could get in the last 10 years, just thanks to the digital revolution or the information revolution that has happened. And especially in writing as a mode, and with the computers in sort of coming in between and helping me do it in those kinds of things. You know that the simple thing like the Wikipedia now is one of the most popular kind of things that is available that everyone could use for all those kinds of things. The reason for that is rather simple, that spoken language is temporal, it sort of dies away in time. The visual language, whatever that comes, occupies space. And that is exactly why it sort of turns that important. Doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter. I'll just, well, let's. Yeah. It's okay. Possibly, did you hear the child's cry? Is it a language at all? Does it communicate anything to you? Or does it communicate anything to someone else? Does it communicate anything to a dog or to the wall or the doctor or the nurse for that matter? All those things are very different. But let me tell you this way, that all languages exist in the way you interpret them rather than the way you encode them or put them. A child's cry, the child does not know why it is crying, but possibly when someone listens to it, it may be possible to interpret it in some way or the other. That is exactly the reason speech-based communication turns very important. And that is a simple and a universal plagiarism that happens. All speech is learned by copying, recorrecting, sort of learning it from someone else and all that kind of thing. These days, when they talk about all these kinds of digital tools that exist in the academic world to say that whether something is copied, I wanted to tell those people who wrote that program to tell me one word that they have invented and they have not copied from somewhere else. So that is how exactly all languages happen. Everything sort of starts from that particular order, and that is how you continue. Not only that, possibly the next step from the child learning to speak is the group learning. And it is in group learning technologies that people have learned or done a lot of those kind of the education of work on languages. Now, especially when the spoken language is being talked about it, there are a few technological issues that come out, and I would just like to sort of go through very quickly 3 or 4 or 5 things that are got. The most important work happened actually by Patricia Kull. Almost the cognition part of the language, spoken language, how a child is trained to identify only or distinguish only between few syllables and not others is the kind of thing that they have to say. And that is technology is being used now to identify when a child responds or when a child does not, when a person responds or when a person doesn't respond, kind of a thing. From the cognition point of view, finally, all languages have to be cognized, and then they have to be recognized and understood at some time or the other, especially at least by humans, if not by machines. We should know how humans do it before possibly machines can do it. And these sort of efforts by Patricia Kull and her experiments tell us exactly about that. There is always this kind of a thing. Chomsky's example of the famous mountain goats, where he talks about a mountain goat, even at birth, can jump a crevice following her mother. So a baby mountain goat obviously could, even at birth, just immediately after birth, can sort of jump across a crevice, kind of a thing. Chomsky always talks about that. So it is one of those pre-knowledge of the language itself, something that is wired in. Whereas Marvin Minsky was the one who opposed it strongly and said that is not the way that it works. And he wanted to say that Pavlov's dogs is the way that you learn your language. It is repeated learning and repeated sort of interventions, repetitions that tell, or getting used to a set of commands, a set of sounds in that particular order, this kind of a thing. Let me forget about all those kinds of things, especially only the last one is that when you think, are you really thinking in terms of words or a spoken language, or is it something like a machine language that you think of? Is the only question that I need ask. And Patricia Kull's experiments directly intervene or sort of tell you about the machine language operations that happen in the brain rather than the physical words that come out at any given time kind of a thing. Well, it doesn't matter of that. No, let's forget about it and go further. Yes, yeah. Yeah, let's go further. Yeah. Now we come to the sort of art of writing or anything that existed. Even our Indian thinkers, even earlier to Panini, at least some 10th century BC, did a lot of work on languages. This was much, much larger compared to anywhere else in the world. And that is exactly one of the reasons that writing system like Brahmi came into existence much later in this country because they were quite happy with whatever they were having in writing. There may be other reasons, I am not concerned. But then they sort of talked about the human uh, grottophonology in that sense, in terms of two kinds of sounds that the humans could produce, consonants and vowels. Consonants, which can be sort of, I mean, you can have a laghu, guru, or a short and a long, or an extra long kind of a time. It can be done that way. But you cannot do with other kind of a thing. Vowels cannot be pronounced in longer terms. They are just sort of instantaneous or very temporal sort of break things that happen in the vocal tract. So that leads to the consonants. So that is why when someone else had to copy or create an artificial language, especially when it happened at Hangul, in Hangal, as they call it in Korea, they went for 19 consonants and 21 vowels. Technically, it is a very, very complete kind of a set of characters that are good enough, at least for the Korean language as spoken. If there are any distinctions that are there, that could always be managed. And you can see that IPA is good for the rest of the languages in the world, but it is so large that it is virtually impossible to archive your information in the written form in an IPA format. Especially if it were there, it would have been very easy, but it is not all that easy. That is what exactly happens. We'll go to the next one. We go to the logographic things, which are very, very pretty in their own way, especially the Chinese sign for the mouth, cow, is something which I love. There are a lot of things that it tells me so many things. It is a cave, a Kanta Gauhara, as we call it. From there, the sounds can come at many levels. And I can see it speaking to me from the moment I see a picture. And to say that that also is the basic element in anything that happens with the language and sound is something very beautiful. Yeah. We'll go a little faster. Yeah, we'll go fast. I've got a few things about the writing media and how each one decides that kind of a thing, the process that is involved. You could see that papyrus is something which is not all that portable, and you can go further. And then we, of course, come to the paper. I missed deliberately the Chinese paper. Yeah, please go to the next one. Then we sort of come to the invention of the printing. Though I am skipping Gutenberg, we come to Underwood, which is a portable typewriter, which carried all the type that was necessary and it could write. Technically, it doesn't have memory. You cannot store anything. It cannot use in that particular order. The real inventions that happened were the linotype machine, which came later, the end of the 19th century, where typically you cast a line at a time and then go for printing. I leave it at that and not any further. Technically, you can carry all the information that were typed on a paper tape. That happens even more correctly when it comes to the monotype system, which uses a caster and a keyboard, two distinct methods. One of them produces just the paper tape, and from that you compose the characters as they come by. Yeah, we'll go. I'll just rush through all these things anyway, doesn't matter. When we start with the very simple thing with prototype setting systems, we'll go further. What you see on the screen is just a few characters in Indus Valley civilization characters, Indus Valley script. And I had the pleasure of making all these characters, writing them all with my own hand once upon a time. As early as 1972, when Tata Press wanted to print a book on Indus Valley civilization, Indus Valley characters, a concordance kind of a thing. We had a alpha type machine, which was modifiable to write all these kinds of characters. We had to use some very high or very small grain size, so film and all that, and write the characters. And there are many, there was a way of partitioning those characters and making it available. All those things worked. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll go to that. Then came possibly the golden age of prototype setting in the grid days, in the days. Berthold, a company which closed down in 1993 after some 146 years of existence, a German company. They made their grid of characters in which the characters were the best of the grids that was ever possible. It was glass discs evaporated with chromium, very hard, very beautiful, the finest of the type ever printed. But then that is almost all. It got over. The moment the computers came in, the early days of type, we had only marching displays, some 24 characters or otherwise. This time I close my document. Hello, when am I to close? I don't want to overrun the thing, and we can as well skip. It doesn't matter.
Please continue, sir. I mean, we are mesmerized by your talk. Please go ahead.
No, you tell me when to close. We are teachers. We can go on forever. So that is the problem that we have got. If we have got a nice audience, if it were face to face, I would have seen from your face that I have to stop.
Absolutely, sir. I think you could see the audience, you'd understand that they would want you to continue. Actually, some of the comments are really, they're really enjoying your talk and would like.
Well, I don't know that anyway. Doesn't matter. I don't see them here because I'm busy with something else. Anyway, the digital type was the essential requirement for all those kind of a thing. You all know about how digital type goes. Early fonts were bitmaps, and obviously we go to the next one. And then comes the algebraic definition of type, where more than machines and computers, mathematics enters the field, and it comes out with these kinds of characters. These are the real characters that we had done once upon a time. Yeah, we'll go to the next one. Yes, okay. Now I'll stop here for some time. I want to talk particularly about Don Knuth and Metafont, the font technique that he adopted. See, unlike the bitmap or dot matrix kind of a type, Don Knuth's Metafont believed in something else, that you take a pen of a particular shape, move it in a particular path and write your character. Doesn't matter if the characters overlap. From that, generate the bitmap for the concept that Metafont carried, and Don Knuth believed in it totally. Accepting that was the time when fonts had their own names called Times Roman and all those kinds of things happened. And it was virtually impossible to create a Times Roman with Metafont system. Then came Warnock from Adobe Systems. He introduced the PostScript, Warnock and Gesche. They made out a system that if you've got infinite space and there is a path that can be used as a shear or a scissors, then it is possible to generate a character from the white piece of paper if you just tell a Caesar how to move around kind of a thing. And that led to PostScript. The best part of Don Knuth was that was the time when he said, don't use Metafont much. Better go for whatever that Warnock has done. And I just respect my guru in that kind of a sense, that one of the finest moments in academics that happens is when in academics, you sort of see someone else doing better and stop, rather than sort of beating on to tell the world that what you have done is the best. As most of the companies in these companies do, they've got their commercial requirements. But once you are out of the commercial things like me, no money is involved. So it turns very fine. I'm not going for the other kinds of things that go. Well, that is there. I got the problem of all these kinds of identifying all these kinds of that Douglas Hofstadter is the one. Now, I want to spend a little time with Unicode. That is one of the thing that started basically with the commercial firms. And when the Unicode Consortium started its activity in Switzerland, I too was a member. Technically, if you want to call it, I was jobless that time. So I joined the Unicode Consortium as a student member. And well, you don't have any right to sell what you need, kind of a thing. And it is just to say that whatever they make is good enough, is all that you have to say. In fact, when I suggested that for all the Indian languages, and possibly for many other scripts that existed at that particular time, it is enough to provide a huge lot of maybe 21 or so, or 29 or so of vowels and consonants. A few consonants, doesn't matter whatever number they are, have separate kind of a thing. Use the system that was being used later by Hangul for that matter, or if it was in the initial days, the way that Brahmi used it. In identifying the characters, there is a odd one out. That is the character A in all Indian languages happens both to be a vowel and a consonant. In fact, that is a very surprising thing that for when writing in Devanagari, for that matter, O, we use a and a O sign on it. But when we write a U, we write it separately. It doesn't not the A with the U sign under it. Why? We don't know. If at all such a character is generated and required, A with the U mark, is it not possible to substitute that with another character which looks like the present character instead of providing a separate position in Unicode chart itself? That was the kind of arguments that I had, and people sort of killed me, just anything short of it. But anyway, that is something which you cannot repair now at all. My contention is one Unicode was enough for the entire lot of Southeastern Asian languages, which are, let me call by an approximate name, Paninian. That is all the sort of syllabic sort of things that we have got in our line. It is always possible to add another 128 characters as a prelude to say that what the script you are using, what language you are using, and all that. But within 128 characters, it was possible to write every other language that was possible. But we have missed the bus forever. Anyway, just to tell you the other part of the truth, that when it comes to the KPR keyboard, everyone says KPR keyboard was invented for Kannada kind of a thing. It's not quite true. KPR keyboard or phonetic keyboard, when I used or when I invented, it was invented, the first user was Telugu, Eenadu. That was when I was from the great Monotype company at that particular time. Then it was adopted for Mathrubhumi, then for a third company elsewhere. But meanwhile, obviously, I sort of developed because there were no customers for our machines, and I had left Monotype also at that particular time. For my own Kannada language, I adopted the keyboard and made the phonetic keyboard and made it free. In fact, I wrote it for 7 Indian languages, but then there was the problem always. I'll tell you what the kind of thing is. So I usually just sort of find it a bit difficult to understand that when they call me always only a Kannada keyboard, well, Kannada used it. Thank you, Kannada. But it was made for all other Indian languages too. Yeah. Now, see, someone mentioned KP Rao, the CDF, my first editor, which was written sometime in about 1981 or 82. This is a file which contains the characters of the language that time. You can see the file name. It says it is Kannada and all that. Forget about all those 9 things. If you just see whatever that is written here, it was all in simple 8-bit characters that had the entire thing. again, using the inherent vowel, that namaskara is written as namas and kara, galu, as you could see. It's possible to write anything in Kannada almost, just with the 52 characters that we have got in English. Maybe just an additional and a full stop at some time or the other. It's possible to do that. Why not in Unicode? Now, I read the same thing at a later time in a new font that I was making, which is based on the new kind of fonts, Apara, that I've got, and I've written that. So just in the same way, virtually I've written in the KP Rao keyboard style, Narayanam Namaskritya kind of a thing. This is the exact keystrokes required if you use the Hindi version of KP Rao keyboard. Narayanam Namaskritya, it could be sort of seen and done that way. This happened to be something very interesting. Basically, it was Malayalam uses two kinds of scripts. One is known as the old Malayalam script, which I'm using Anjali Old here. It was the way that we sort of learnt our Malayalam that time in this script. But these days they use something else. Very surprisingly, both these data are stored and contained in an identical form. It is only the font that reads it differently. The same text, it is not unchanged, it is just read differently the moment you use the new font. Same thing happens in the lower characters also. I had two Tulu versions, and you can see the same text that was there is read in Tulu without any change, without any modification, in two of the Tulu fonts that I have generated. The reason for that is, it is understanding what is required in Tulu. The font is intelligent enough to recompose it the way that suits Tulu rather than anything else. Like the old Malayalam understands and rewrites it in its own style, understanding it. Very fortunately, Tulu is very, very similar to similar language, especially if you see the ka that I've written, ka, and ki. The ka here and the ka here are very, very similar on top. And it is those kinds of things, possibly they too can be asked, whatever that we write, Sinhala also can read it without kind of a change. A real test of that came up in a very different kind of a situation that happened to me. One of the scheduled languages, Konkani, in Goa, they started producing a Wikipedia page in Konkani, and they were writing it all in Nagari script. We had a problem to read them in Kannada script. And unfortunately, it is not copied right. But this particular line, if you just read, at least in my computer back there, if you read it in that, you can see it in Brahmi, you can see it in that, you can see it in Sharada, or you can even in a Baduga font that I created just for please a few friends or few devotees of their language. It is possible to have the same text read in any script that you need without any kind of intervention. And that should be possible virtually for all Indian languages. The differences that exist in all such things can be done. There is another thing that I would just want to tell about. My guru, Siddhya Krishna Bhatt, was talking always about the style of analyzing a language, the Bhasha Gati, as they call it. Even in the scribe and writing, there is a Rekha Gati. So if just a character is shown, it is possible to identify to which language or which script it belongs to rather easily. Very little work has been done on that kind of a thing. And yeah, let's go to the next one. Let's go through that. Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah. There is a small application that we used, my knowledge of languages. This happened with the way the characters develop over time. And the subject is obviously known as paleography. How exactly a script sort of changes over time, kind of a thing. Up to a long time, Ahmad Hassan Dani, who happens to be an expert on that, happens to have written a huge book on Indian paleography. We'll go to the next one, next one, next one, the next one again. Is it possible to write a digital paleography? That is how a character has changed over time from one to the other that exists now. Is it possible to see and sort of realize is one of the things that I was working on, just as a entertainment exercise, if you want to call it, but I enjoyed doing it. So that is what I want to tell you. Yeah. See, this is the character Brahmis. Just by doing these commands, it is possible to convert that into the present Devanagari. This is the Brahmi as you see. In here, this again is a, let's just run it. Yeah, it works fine. No, this happens to be the original character was Aleph, the Sumerian or the Egyptian character for the bull. They say that Sumerian was or the Assyrian language script was the mother of Brahmi, but I don't believe it. To prove that it looks mad and impossible that one would change that way, I was using the paleography itself. So it is possible to do quite a lot of use this kind of a technology into many other kinds of variants that exist. Again, that also I was showing how the Tamil and all the Indian other Tamil possibly was derived from a variant of Devanagari for a time. And the Shatavahana artisan who changed it into a Kannada character at some other time. Yeah, I think I have definitely overtaken the time of that one is to take. I think it's better I stop rather than go forever. Thank you very much for a generally patient listening. No one shouted or asked me to close down. So I thought I could continue forever. There are a lot of problems that I enjoy working on. And of course, I need all your good officers to help me with it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. There's a question posted for you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll read it. Yeah, I'll read it out. What would your ideal world look like in terms of IT use if it was possible tomorrow?
Yeah, possibly something like a Hangul, the standard script for the entire lot of the world, so that everyone can at least read each other, if not understand each other. That may be secondary, but if you can read each other's thoughts, all of those documents, so it may be that much simpler at least, kind of a thing. But that doesn't happen. There is so much of politics involved. So
thank you so much.
All, yeah.
I'm so sorry, sir. Will you continue?
No.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your extensive knowledge with us, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we continue, can everybody switch on their camera to capture a group picture together?
So that was very inspiring. I mean, it was a privilege to listen to you and the philosophical underpinnings of everything we do today. It's great to hear from someone like you.
Anything? I think I've closed. Stop.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Real pleasure. It really made our day. And if you could see the comments, they're really appreciating the kind of enlightenment that you gave us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, really, this is a wonderful listening, sir.
Thank you. We'll go forever. See, that's the
Yeah,
problem.
yeah,
with our
we will
teachers.
connect sometime later also and listen more from you.
Yeah, see, there is nothing to be done, Dr. Kumar, on
Yeah.
this kinds of things. You have done everything. So
No,
what I do is only for my own pleasure.
that is
I
fine,
enjoy
sir,
doing what I do.
but to know what you are doing and how you are visualizing is also important, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for staying with me till here. I'd like to invite Harshita to take over the session now.